Hello and good afternoon, CSI258 students. This is going to be an addendum to the previous video that I did on Packet Tracer Activity 3.3.2.7. And the reason I'm doing the addendum is I was recently having a conversation with a colleague of mine, and I had made the comment that when you're doing CHAP authentication with PPP, that you cannot use secrets. You can't use secret passwords to do the authentication because there's no way to hash a hash. So in other words, they're irreversible. And at that point, she had commented to me that she had seen a packet tracer activity and then actually gave me the packet tracer activity number. As you can see here, step 3, we're not going to do the whole activity, just the packet tracer piece, because this, you cannot do this on actual Cisco routers. And I've got a couple routers up behind us here. And again, it's interesting that it's set up like this, that they have you use a secret instead of simply a type 7. Remember, a secret's going to give you a type 5, which is an MD5 hash. And a type 7 is going to give you a very easily reversible password. So let's go ahead and take a look here, because we're going to go ahead and see that they actually have it so that it is set up. And let's make sure I get this right here. It says between router 3 and ISP. So let's pull router 3 up, and we'll give ourselves a little more real estate to work with here. And this is extremely important because this could become a huge point of confusion if you were trying to configure this in the real world. It's not going to work, and you'll see what's going to happen here. It would bounce up and down. So let's go ahead and jump in, and it's looking for, it first wants to create the username. So if I say do show run, you can see that we have no usernames configured right now. So let's add this username in. So it's going to be username username R3, that was on ISP. And I pulled R3 up first, so let's make sure we get this right. So yeah, username ISP, and they have the secret here. Now, you have a couple choices when you're doing this. You could type in secret or password. Again, secret's going to work in Packet Tracer, but this will not work on actual Cisco hardware. So we'll say secret Cisco. So now if I say do show run, there is my username, and you can see here that these first 3 characters, this is the, I believe this is the salt, right? And then what follows in between, so that let me clarify here. So the $1 and then this $sign here, what sits in between this is the salt for the hash. Everything that follows it is the actual password that is that has been hashed, right? So again, you can't reverse. That's one of the benefits of the MD5 hash, is that you can't reverse the hash, right? There's no way to reverse it. So now let's go ahead and move over to the ISP router, and there's the ISP router, which is way down there on the bottom. And we're going to set the same thing here on the, similar on the ISP router. So first they want us to configure the host name. So we'll go from user exec to privilege exec into global config and say hostname ISP. And then we're going to say username R3. And again, you have choices, password or secret. So they want us to use secret, and we'll say Cisco. So let's finish up the config here, interface serial 000. And we're going to say incap, well actually they just have PPP Authentication CHAP. PPP Authentication CHAP. And that's what I thought. You must set the encapsulation. So again, it looks like there may be some typos in this one. They don't actually have the PPP or the incap PPP, right? And now you'll see it'll take the interface down because the other side is running Cisco's default, which is HDLC, or Cisco's recipe for HDLC. Now we can run the PPP Authentication CHAP command. So if I were to end this here and say debug PPP Authentication, and hopefully it'll let it do that, and it does. All right, so let's come back up here and take a look at router 3 here. you can see the interface is down. So let's go ahead and go into interface serial 010 and do show run. Let's see what that interface looks like right now. You can see that it's just basically a link to the ISP. So we're going to say PPP, and you can also see that they're missing the in-cap PPP here. So in-cap PPP, and then we would say PPP authentication. Now the interface has come up. So let's step back over here real quickly to the ISP router. And the debug is not actually giving us everything that we would see on a real Cisco router. However, it's interesting that it's saying that the interface is up. So if I say show IP interface brief, we can see that the serial 000 interface here is up and up. Well, let's go back to router 3 and say do show IP interface brief, and the serial 010 interface is up and up. Now, this is not possible on real Cisco hardware. So if I were to finish things up, do show run. Actually, I think we're done. I think we have the username. Yeah, so the username is there, and then we've got the in-cap PPP, and as you can see, it's up, and we haven't even finished configuring the authentication piece yet. So PPP, authentication, CHAP. And you can see it shows it go down and then come right back up. Do show IP interface brief. It's interesting here, right? It's showing that we are up and up. So let's ping the other side. Do ping 209.165.200.226. And look at that. We've got connectivity. So we have a couple of what appear to be typos here, right? So we're missing, on both of these, we're missing the command that needs to precede this, which is in-cap PPP, to set the encapsulation to PPP first, right? And we need to have that command on both of these routers on those interfaces before we run PPP authentication CHAP. Okay. So now this works in Packet Tracer, right? Let's take a look here on some real Cisco routers, and even though this says 2611, this is, or 2610XM, this is actually it's an 1841 router, just like the router it's connected to here. So let's get into the Santa Rosa router here, and let's say show IP interface brief. And so we're going to be working on serial 000 on both sides. So let me go ahead and we'll go into global config. Let's configure the username first, and this is going to be a little easier on this side because the username, the challenge that comes in, let me copy that now, will come in from router 1. So username router 1, and I'm going to use secret, and we'll say Cisco. So when I say do show run, and I can't do this on Packet Tracer, but I can do it here, include username, whoops, include username, and I still have a typo in there. There we go. You can see that again, here is the salt. It falls between the $1 so that's the salt, and this falls in between those 4 characters there. And then what we have after that is the hashed password. Okay, so we're setting it up a secret here. Let's get into the interface, serial 000. And over on the R1 side, I'm actually going to go ahead and do a debug here. We're going to say debug PPP authentication. So PPP authentication is on, it's being debugged. So we'll change the encapsulation first, right? So we'll say in-cap PPP, and then PPP authentication CHAP. Now you can see, let me make sure I took that. All right, so you can see that we now have authentication set up, and you can ignore that tunnel 0 message. That's something else is going on there because these are configured to do a whole bunch of things. But again, this is going to prove the point that you can't do this with the secret passwords. So now I'm going to go ahead and end here. I'm also going to debug here. So debug PPP authentication. So let's come over to the other side, router 1. So we're going to say conf t to configure terminal to get into global config mode, and you can see immediately we see a message telling us that the serial 00 interface is down. So if I say do show IP interface brief, right, serial 000, the layer 1 is up, but layer 2 is down. So let's go ahead and fix that. So I'm going to say, or we'll try to fix that. So we'll say username, and the username is actually what I had just highlighted there. Let me go grab it again here real quick. So we'll say Santa Rosa R3 and paste, and we'll say secret Cisco. Now let's jump into interface serial 000, where we're going to say NCAP PPP, PPP authentication, CHAP, just like we did on the other side over here. But what we're going to see is this is going to fail. And you can see that it's failing repeatedly here, right? And you can see we've got the keyword there, unable to authenticate peer, unable to authenticate peer. If we come over here, we see much the same thing, that it's failing. So if I were to kill the debug here, right, we can clearly see that we're receiving messages that are telling us that the response is failing, right? And what are we seeing? Take a look here, and this is what you'll see, not while we're debugging, but when we quit the debug, you're going to see that this is going to go on. The interface will simply flap. It will go up and down, up and down, up and down, that the interface will really never, and let me get rid of those last couple of zeros there, the interface will really never come up. It's simply going to flap up and down. And this is actually what's going to happen if you try to use secrets as the password with your PPP or with your CHAP authentication, right? So if I were to say show IP interface brief, show IP interface brief, we can see that it shows up, up, but then it goes down, and now it's up, down. So it's possible, and especially if you're not logging to the console and catching these messages, you may catch it. If you catch it right here, you might think that it is up and that it should work. And so again, if I do show IP interface brief, you can see it's up, down, right? Up, down, and here, so there it is again, right? So I catch it as it comes. The layer 2 tries to come up, but then it goes back down. Because remember, if CHAP authentication doesn't complete, the interface is not going to transition to the layer 3 capable interface, right? You're not going to have any layer 3 capabilities. So let's see if I were to ping the other side, 209.165.200.13.1. So let's see what happens when we ping here. So you can see that the pings are failing even when the interface is flapping. And let me repeat this a few times. We'll do it 100 times. We'll see what we get. So again, even when that interface ever so briefly transitions to up, up, it is not actually up because it's going down immediately. It's never able to finish the negotiation, right, or the authentication component with the password. And so you've got the link control protocol and the network control protocol that are trying to bring that interface up, and they're unable to make that happen. And so as you can see, I don't see any exclamation marks in there. So even when the interface reports that it is up, up, that is a very brief report that quickly changes and the interface is actually down. So again, let's break out of that. So again, you may get the impression that, hey, my interface is up, up. If you run this command at the right, there you go, like right there. If I run this command at the right time and I am not logging, you're going to see this, and it's not going to make sense as to, well, wait a second, why does it say up, up, but I can't ping and it's not working? And this is the reason that it's not working, is that the PPP protocol cannot complete the LCP and the NCP, and authentication is not the right word, but the negotiation between those protocols, right? Or not between the protocols, but for those protocols between the routers. And so this is why you can't use the secret passwords, or this is what's going to happen when you use the secret passwords. And again, the reason why you can't is because you can't hash a hash, right? So when there's a challenge, so let's say router 1 is challenging router 3, and router 3 is responding with a hash, router 1 has no idea how to reverse that hash because it wasn't created on router 1. It was created on router 3. So let's go ahead and let's fix this. So how would we fix it? We're going to go ahead and go into global config and do show run section username. And we're going to say no username R1. And we'll pull that username out. And then we're going to add the username R1 back in. And now this time, and holy Toledo, many more choices here as compared to Packet Tracer. So we're just going to say password Cisco, right? And again, this will be a type 7 password. You can see the interface continues to flap if I say do show run section username, or if I were to include username. You can see there that we don't have service encryption or service password encryption enabled, so it's not actually even encrypting it. So it's just simply plain text. So let me go ahead just to make sure, and we'll say service, password encryption. Let's run that command again, and there you go. And again, this is extremely weak in terms of protecting, but it's not meant to be unbreakable. This is simply meant so that if someone's looking over your shoulder, or if you accidentally, leave your screen unlocked and somebody, comes in, if it's a general use cube or whatever, that they're going to see that. They're not going to know what that is. They're not going to know that means Cisco. And that's really all the type 7 passwords are for. And Cisco actually, in a number of documents, has been very clear and upfront about that these type 7 passwords aren't to prevent the wiliest of hackers from getting into your systems. They're simply there so that if somebody's looking over your shoulder, that random string of characters, it's a little more difficult to remember than Cisco. All right, so we've got this side taken care of. Let's jump to the router 1 side. You can see here we're still getting failures, and let me go ahead and do you all. So we're going to kill debugging here and do show run section username. And we're going to say no, and we'll pull this back, and we'll take that out. That's fine, and we'll create a new username. And we'll use, and we'll simply say password Cisco. Now we're still debugging on this side over here. Let's see what happens, and take a look at that. Or actually, we weren't debugging there. I apologize. But look what happens. The interface comes up. And it also brought up this tunnel interface, which is also running. But that's not really in the picture for what we're talking about here with these serial interfaces. So if I say do show IP interface brief, you can see that it's up. It's no longer flapping. And more importantly, do we have layer 3 reachability? Can I get to the interface on the other side via the ping command, which is probably going to be a little easier, I guess, just to type in here. So do ping 209.165.13. And I think it's router 1 on the other side. And so there you go. And so again, really interesting that in this activity, and I've actually done a video on this activity, and I can't remember if I actually pointed this out or not. But this is very, very important, and this leads to a lot of confusion with new learners who transition from the packet tracer activity to the actual hardware, and clearly being given the impression that you can use a secret password with CHAP authentication. And we actually just kind of walked through it here and spent a few minutes and showed you why you cannot and what you're going to see when you try to do that. And more importantly, if you catch it at the right time when you do your show IP interface brief, you're going to think that everything is okay, especially if you're not logging to the console. You're going to think that everything is fine because you're going to see that up, and then that's going to raise questions as to, wait a second, why is this not working, right? And so we saw that the ping didn't work either. All right, well, this wraps up really kind of an addendum to Packet Tracer Activity 3.3.2.7 for any students who are out there taking the Networking 4 course, which is the Connecting Networks for the Cisco Networking Academy. I hope that this has clarified, maybe if you've run into this before, why it's not working, how you can, what behavior or what are the symptoms you're going to see if you're trying to use secret passwords for your CHAP authentication, and how you can resolve it. And that's simply by using a Type 7 password. All right, well, thank you so much for watching, and have a great semester.